In 216 BC, the city of Rome trembled with unease. The streets, once bustling with daily life, were now filled with anxious whispers. Pale-faced senators gathered in darkened chambers, muttering the same ominous phrase, "Hannibal at the gates." But those whispers, heavy with fear, would soon give way to cries of terror. The entire city, from the eldest to the youngest, repeated the dreadful words, "Hannibal had arrived." Hannibal, the masterful commander from Carthage, had defied every expectation. The Romans, confident that the vast Mediterranean would keep him away, thought they were safe. But Hannibal shattered that illusion. He crossed the sea, and with each victory over the Roman legions, he advanced further, inching closer to the heart of the empire. Now, he stood on the very doorstep of Rome, poised to deliver the fatal blow. As the fear spread, the people of Rome could see the horrors to come. Dust rising in clouds, the thunder of hooves shaking the earth, the gleam of swords wet with blood. At the center of this imagined chaos loomed Hannibal, an unstoppable force, the very embodiment of death and destruction. For the Romans, his presence meant more than just defeat, it signaled the end of everything. Their army, their history, their future, all teetered on the edge of annihilation. But then, something happened. Something no one could have ever foreseen. What came next was beyond anything they had ever imagined. The story begins long before Hannibal's time, in an era when two great powers were just beginning to rise. On one side was Carthage, a wealthy trading civilization in North Africa, eager to expand its reach by claiming new ports and dominating the vital trade routes. On the other side stood Rome, a burgeoning military force in southern Europe, driven by a hunger for conquest and the desire to add new lands to its growing empire. For a while, each power focused on its own ambitions, growing steadily, yet always keeping a watchful eye on the other. Beneath their outward focus on expansion, there was a simmering tension, fear and suspicion brewing as they observed each other's rise. Both civilizations had dreams of greatness, and both sought to expand their influence. Between them lay the vast Mediterranean Sea, one to the north, the other to the south. This sea divide kept them apart, but only for a time. Their paths of conquest were set on a collision course, and sooner or later, the clash between these two mighty powers would be inevitable. The inevitable clash finally came in 246 BC, igniting what would be known as the First Punic War. The Romans called the people of Carthage Punic, and their fight centered on the island of Sicily, a prized jewel both sides desperately craved. The war was brutal, with neither power able to gain the upper hand for long. They were too evenly matched, and so the conflict dragged on for over 2 decades, with battles fought and lives lost, but no decisive victory in sight. As the years passed, exhaustion settled in. Then, in the 23rd year of the war, Carthage decided to retreat and end the war to focus more on their trade and business across the Mediterranean. But Rome had other plans. They didn't just want victory, they wanted to humiliate their rival. Carthage was forced to pay a staggering tribute of 81 tons of silver every year and withdraw its forces not only from Sicily but from other islands untouched by the conflict. For Carthage, this surrender was more than a loss. It was a blow to their pride and a painful reminder of Rome's growing dominance. During this time, there was a legendary leader by the name of Hannibal Barca, one of the most significant commanders in the First Punic War. Hamilcar was not just a skilled warrior, but also one of Carthage's most influential figures. He led the Carthaginian expedition to Spain, where the Barca family founded a city they named New Carthage, known today as Cartagena. Hamilcar had a young son named Hannibal, who was just 9 years old when he accompanied his father to a solemn religious ceremony in Carthage. There, Hannibal watched his father, burdened by defeat and humiliation. Despite never losing a battle against Rome, Hamilcar was furious at his nation's surrender. He was a man stripped of pride, and Hannibal could see the sorrow in his eyes. Amidst the flickering flames and the chanting of the priests offering sacrifices to the god Baal, Hamilcar took his son's hand. He knelt beside him, and with a firm voice, made Hannibal swear an oath. As long as he lived, Hannibal was to be Rome's sworn enemy. The young boy, with a heart full of conviction, repeated the vow and silently promised never to break it. Years passed after Carthage's surrender, and under the weight of Rome's harsh sanctions, Hannibal grew into a formidable warrior. By the age of 26, he had taken command of the army in Spain and swiftly expanded Carthaginian influence, conquering cities and strengthening Carthage's presence. One day, Roman emissaries arrived with a message from Rome. Their eyes filled with arrogance, they spoke of Rome's displeasure at Carthage's growing power in Spain, especially as Hannibal's conquests continued to spread. They warned him not to cross a line. The city of Saguntum, in eastern Spain, belonged to Rome, and if Hannibal's army even approached its borders, war would follow. As Hannibal listened, memories of his father's humiliation flooded his mind, and he remembered the oath he had sworn as a child. He faced the emissaries and, with unwavering resolve, told them that he would not halt his conquests. And next time, there would be no need for messengers, for Hannibal himself would come to Rome's doorstep. Rome had anticipated defiance from Hannibal, knowing his hatred for them. But what they had not expected was the speed and ferocity of his response. In a matter of weeks, Hannibal led his army to Saguntum, stormed its walls, and brought the city to its knees. In that moment, as Hannibal took Saguntum, he ignited the flames of the Second Punic War. The Romans could never have imagined that Hannibal would come anywhere near Rome. The thought seemed impossible. How could Hannibal reach Rome? The Mediterranean Sea stood between them, and Carthage's once mighty fleet had been destroyed in the First Punic War. Even if he marched from Spain, how could he cross the towering Pyrenees Mountains, the mighty Rhone River, and the treacherous Alps? For Hannibal to march his army to Rome, he would need to navigate 2 mountain ranges and a major river, a journey many considered impossible. What's more, Hannibal was entirely on his own. Carthage had offered him no support. The leaders in Carthage were concerned about how another war with Rome would affect their trade. They saw him as a solitary dreamer, a lone general leading his army into foreign lands to face the most powerful nation in the world. Yet Hannibal's army was nothing short of extraordinary: 100,000 soldiers, 19,000 horses, and 37 war elephants. Rome rested easy, confident that no one, especially not someone leading war elephants, could traverse such a perilous route. But Hannibal, undeterred, made a critical and daring decision. He led his army, horses, and elephants through the Pyrenees Mountains. And when they reached the Rhone River, he did the unimaginable. He built boats for the elephants, ferrying them across the swift waters. Next, he braved the icy, treacherous Alps, enduring temperatures that plunged below freezing. The journey was brutal. Starvation, exhaustion, and cold claimed the lives of many of his men. The Romans, believing the trek to be impossible, dismissed Hannibal as a reckless fool. But when news reached them that Hannibal had completed the journey and his army had arrived in Italy, the shock and terror were profound. Rome had never expected this audacious plan to succeed. Although Hannibal's army had been greatly weakened by the ordeal, with many soldiers lost along the way, they had no time to rest. Rome knew they had arrived and would soon strike. Standing on a cliff overlooking Rome, Hannibal rallied his weary troops. With the mountains behind them and the enemy before them, he declared that there was no option but to fight. Victory was the only way forward. Meanwhile, on the other side, Rome's commander, Scipio the Elder, preached confidence to his soldiers. He assured them that the battle would be easy. They would face a ragtag group of starving men, barely holding on after their grueling journey. Rome's soldiers believed it would be a swift victory, and that Hannibal, a young, reckless commander consumed by glory and vengeance, would soon be put in his place. But when the armies met at the banks of the Ticino River, the smiles vanished from the faces of the Roman soldiers. What they had assumed would be an easy win turned into chaos. Hannibal's army fought with precision and skill. Scipio the Elder himself barely escaped with his life. The battle was swift, and Hannibal emerged victorious. Rome had gravely underestimated its opponent. Hannibal was no reckless commander, but a brilliant strategist. Battle after battle, Hannibal faced Roman forces twice the size of his own, and triumphed. Over the years, Rome's fear of Hannibal grew, as he roamed their lands, becoming a constant threat to the heart of the Roman Republic. Rome, determined to remain the dominant power, knew that if it wanted to survive, it had to eliminate Hannibal once and for all. On August 2nd, 216 BC, Rome assembled a formidable force of 70,000 warriors, the largest army it had ever mustered. On the day of the battle, Hannibal surveyed the vast ranks of Roman soldiers before him, realizing they far outnumbered his own troops. Rome had poured its resources into bolstering its army and equipping its soldiers for a direct assault, relying on sheer brute force to smash through enemy lines. In contrast, Hannibal was accustomed to fighting on foreign soil with a smaller force, which meant he couldn't afford the luxury of overwhelming strength. As the Roman army stared at Hannibal's front lines, they saw only a weak barrier, ripe for breaking. They surged forward, penetrating the Carthaginian ranks, their confidence soaring as they envisioned Hannibal's severed head displayed in Rome as a warning to any who dared challenge the empire. But from his vantage point, Hannibal laughed, not in despair, but in triumph. While the Romans saw victory, he saw them as rats scurrying into a trap of his own design. In a breathtaking turn of events, that seemingly fragile line of soldiers collapsed and reformed into a tightening circle, enclosing the Romans from all sides. 70,000 soldiers found themselves trapped, with any desperate push to escape only hastening their demise. At that moment, the Roman warriors could do nothing but await their inevitable fate, ensnared by Hannibal's cunning strategy. As hours passed, Hannibal's forces methodically cut down the encircled Romans. Some accounts tell of soldiers digging holes in the ground, burying their heads to suffocate rather than face the horror of death at the hands of Hannibal's men. Those who survived begged for mercy, pleading with Hannibal's soldiers to end their suffering. That day, it is said, 50,000 Roman soldiers fell, including their commander and 3 senators, a staggering defeat that would forever mark the annals of history. This was Hannibal's masterpiece, a flawless display of strategy that demonstrated how to triumph against a more powerful foe. His tactics are still studied around the world today, teaching the art of winning despite being the underdog. When news of the catastrophic defeat reached Rome, chaos erupted. The streets echoed with the sounds of screaming and weeping as fear gripped the city. Every household mourned a victim of Hannibal's wrath. People rushed to the temples, praying for deliverance, fully convinced that Hannibal would march into Rome within days, only a short journey away. The terror they felt that day would be etched into their memories for generations to come. Yet Hannibal took an unexpected turn and sent messengers to negotiate the release of the captives taken at Cannae. Rome coldly rejected his offer. They insisted that Hannibal keep the captives, despite their desperate need for soldiers. This refusal stemmed from a deeper significance. Accepting the negotiation would mean acknowledging defeat, a notion Rome would never entertain. Despite standing at the gates of Rome, Hannibal chose not to advance because to lay siege to a city as vast as Rome, fortified by towering walls and numerous defenders, would require far more soldiers and resources than he possessed. Hannibal had always relied on strategy and tactical brilliance to overcome greater numbers, but the logistics of besieging a mighty city were daunting. Alone in this campaign, he understood that no matter how brilliant or courageous he might be, he remained a solitary commander leading a small army in enemy territory, facing the full might of an empire. In the wake of their most devastating defeat, Rome chose resilience over surrender, vowing to fight until the last breath. A famous Roman saying echoed in their hearts, "The victor is not victorious if the vanquished does not consider himself so." Refusing to accept their humiliation, the Romans swiftly rallied to form a new army, calling upon every able-bodied man over the age of 17 to take up arms. Even the slaves who weren't allowed to fight were offered freedom in exchange for their service. In a remarkable show of determination, 8,000 individuals joined the ranks, ready to defend their homeland. As the city braced itself for vengeance, a new law emerged, banning any signs of mourning. Grief would have to wait. First, they would seek retribution against Hannibal and ensure that no empire could challenge Rome's sovereignty again. Thus began the Second Punic War, a fierce contest between Hannibal and the might of Rome, which had significantly expanded its influence in Italy, conquering many tribal cities in the years leading up to the conflict. Hannibal, however, never aimed to destroy Rome outright. That was a distant dream. His true goal was to weaken them, employing a two-pronged strategy. On the battlefield, He had already defeated them, but he knew that to shift the balance of power, he must also sway Rome's allies. He understood that Rome's expansion had fueled its strength, and if he could turn those allies to his side, Rome would be stripped of its authority and reduced to just another city. Following his victory at Cannae, Hannibal's strategy began to bear fruit as many of Rome's allies defected to him. But their allegiance came with a crucial condition: Hannibal had to protect their cities from Roman retribution. This very condition soon became a double-edged sword. Learning from their previous mistakes, the Romans devised a cunning plan to exploit this vulnerability. After suffering grave losses at Hannibal's hands, they recognized that a direct confrontation would only lead to more defeat. Instead, they resolved to weaken him by attacking those very allies he had sworn to defend. As Hannibal realized Rome's intentions, he reached out to his brother in Spain for reinforcements. Indeed, his brother mustered a formidable army and set out to aid Hannibal. The Romans, however, proved to be shrewd strategists. They launched simultaneous attacks on two of Hannibal's allied cities, cleverly orchestrated so that Hannibal would be left guessing which one to defend. The message was clear to those cities: you allied with the wrong person, Rome can crush you anytime. One by one, Hannibal's allies abandoned him, returning to Rome's fold and leaving him isolated in the face of overwhelming odds. Yet amidst the despair, a flicker of hope remained. His brother's impending arrival could change the tide of war. Days turned into weeks as Hannibal anxiously awaited his reinforcements. Then, one fateful day, a messenger approached his camp, carrying a box. With trepidation, Hannibal opened it, only to be met with the horrifying sight of his brother's decapitated head. In that moment, the weight of despair descended upon him. Any help he had hoped for was extinguished, and he understood that the war would continue on his shoulders alone. For the next 15 years, the conflict settled into a grim stalemate. Skirmishes erupted between the two powers, yet none escalated into a decisive battle. Hannibal forged new alliances, only to lose them again, trapped in a cycle of fleeting hopes. On one side stood Hannibal, too weakened to launch a full assault on Rome. On the other, Rome, equally hindered by its fear of Hannibal's legendary prowess. Thus, the two formidable forces remained almost evenly matched, locked in a war that yielded no clear victor. Hannibal's approach to warfare was unlike anything Rome had ever encountered, creating a bewildering sense that he was playing an entirely different game, one where he dictated the rules and knew how to claim victory. It soon dawned on the Romans that they could not defeat Hannibal with their traditional mindset. To overcome him, they needed to adopt his way of thinking. This realization sparked the need for a new leader, someone who could break away from the blunt force tactics that had led to their previous failures. Scipio the Younger was the pivotal figure Rome desperately needed. Like Hannibal, he had grown up steeped in animosity toward his rival, vowing his allegiance to Rome just as Hannibal had sworn his loyalty to Carthage. Both men shared similar backgrounds and motivations, but their paths diverged on the battlefield. Scipio had fought valiantly in all of Rome's battles, wielding his sword under the guidance of his commanders. Yet, all the while, he meticulously observed Hannibal's tactics, learning not from his own people but from the enemy himself. Recognizing the fundamental flaws in Rome's strategies, Scipio understood that facing Hannibal head-on was not an option. The Carthaginian general had caught them off guard, waging war on their soil, so Scipio devised a bold plan. If Hannibal could bring the fight to Rome, then perhaps it was time for Rome to do the same and make the people of Carthage tremble with the shout of Scipio at the gates. Though some Roman leaders were skeptical of this risky strategy, fearing it might provoke Hannibal into a counterattack, Scipio's determination shone through. After much negotiation, he gained the support of the Roman government and prepared a grand fleet to sail to the North African coast, ready to confront Hannibal on his home turf. Scipio accomplished what Hannibal had failed to do. He garnered the loyalty of Carthage's allies. He recognized that one of Hannibal's greatest strengths lay in his cavalry, composed of skilled horsemen from a neighboring region called Numidia. Scipio cleverly exploited the greed of a Numidian leader, promising him control of Numidia in exchange for his allegiance. This maneuver not only secured the loyalty of a crucial ally, but also deprived Hannibal of one of his most powerful assets. With the battlefield mapped out in his mind, Scipio employed a tactic he had learned from observing Hannibal. he studied the enemy's camp, noting the closely clustered tents made of hay. He devised a brilliant plan to set fire to one of the tents, knowing that the flames would rapidly spread, engulfing the entire camp. By executing this strategy, Scipio managed to eliminate a significant portion of Carthage's forces without engaging in direct combat, preserving his own soldiers in the process. As Scipio emerged as a formidable leader against a powerful foe, his reputation grew, and he dealt more devastating blows to Carthage in various battles. Eventually, a delegation from Carthage approached him, seeking to negotiate a peace treaty. The desire to avoid further conflict, especially with Hannibal's return looming, opened the door for discussion. Scipio signed the treaty, effectively summoning Hannibal back from Rome. However, upon his arrival with his army, the leaders of Carthage found themselves consumed by ambition. They thought, if Hannibal is as strong as he claims, let's send him against Scipio. This time, victory will truly be ours. As the sun rose over Zama, a city just 100 miles from Carthage, Hannibal prepared to face his greatest challenge yet, a clash with the Roman army led by Scipio, his most formidable adversary. This battle was unlike any he had encountered before. Scipio was not just a commander, he was a strategist who understood Hannibal's tactics all too well and would not fall for any of his traps or ambushes. Hannibal commanded a diverse army, comprised of soldiers from far-flung regions such as Spain, Libya, Algeria, and France. This patchwork of warriors, while formidable, brought with it a significant challenge. They spoke different languages. In the heat of battle, this language barrier made it nearly impossible for Hannibal to adapt his plans or issue new commands swiftly. Meanwhile, Scipio, with his keen understanding of warfare, remained an unpredictable force, making it even harder for Hannibal to mount an effective response. Scipio had already gained control of Hannibal's weapon, the Numidian cavalry. With their speed and agility now at Scipio's command, the stakes had never been higher. On October 17, 202 BC, the battlefield echoed with the sounds of clashing swords and the cries of warriors as the two armies collided. But as the dust settled that day, it became clear, Hannibal, the legendary general who had never known defeat, was vanquished in the Battle of Zama. In a cruel twist of fate, he was undone by the very strategies and weapons he had once wielded with such skill. No one defeats Hannibal but Hannibal, the saying would echo through the ages, a testament to the tragic irony of his downfall. After the devastating loss at Zama, Carthage was forced to sign a humiliating peace treaty, far more degrading than the one that had ended the First Punic War. Hannibal, tasting the bitterness of defeat, resigned as the army's leader and instead turned to a life of politics, becoming a government official. Determined to root out the corruption plaguing Carthage, he fought fiercely, but his efforts only earned him powerful enemies. Hatred towards him grew so intense that his rivals plotted to hand him over to Rome. When Hannibal learned of their betrayal, he fled Carthage, leaving behind the city he had fought so hard to defend. From that moment on, he became a fugitive, spending the rest of his days pursued by the shadow of Rome. Yet, his father's oath, his eternal vow to remain Rome's enemy, remained etched in his heart. He found refuge in foreign lands, offering his military expertise to kings fighting against Rome, always seeking a way to fulfill his vow. But Rome's reach was long. In one of those far-off lands, the day came when Roman soldiers marched to his doorstep. As Hannibal listened to their approaching footsteps, he knew his time had come. The once great general, who had struck fear into the heart of Rome, decided he would not give them the satisfaction of capturing him. He refused to be paraded through Rome in chains, a prisoner of his greatest enemy. Hannibal took control of his fate. He drank the poison he had kept close for this very moment, ready to meet death on his own terms. With his final breath, he spoke the words that would echo through history: "Let us now relieve the Romans of their fears by the death of a feeble old man." And with that, Rome's greatest adversary slipped into legend. After the Second Punic War, Carthage chose to avoid any further conflict with its powerful rival. Instead, it turned its focus to rebuilding through trade, flourishing once more in just a few years. But Rome's fear of Carthage's potential for revenge never faded, even after Hannibal's death, some 40 years later. they still remembered the threat he posed, and the destruction he had almost brought upon them. This lingering fear is what drove Rome to launch the Third Punic War, a war that would become a massacre. Before a single battle was fought, Rome demanded that Carthage surrender all of its weapons if it wished to avoid destruction. Carthage, hoping for peace, complied. But Rome had no intention of honoring its promise. Shortly after, the Roman legions besieged Carthage, trapping a disarmed people within their walls. The siege dragged on for 3 long years, with the Carthaginians fighting desperately to defend their land and hold their gates against a relentless foe. Finally, one day, Rome breached the city's defenses. For 6 days, the Romans slaughtered anyone they found. On the 7th day, they spared the remaining survivors, but only to enslave them. After the bloodshed, the Roman soldiers wandered through the streets of Carthage, setting fire to every building in sight. They did not leave until the city was burned to the ground, ensuring that no trace of Carthage remained, and that the rise of another Hannibal became impossible. Though Hannibal had lost his war with Rome, he had won the war against oblivion. For while countless others have lived and died, forgotten by history, his name remains etched in memory forever.